Bomberman is a video game franchise originally developed by Hudson Soft and currently owned by Konami. The original game was released in Japan in July of 1983 and has since spawned multiple sequels and spin-offs released on numerous platforms. As of 2007, the series had already sold over 10 million copies. Most entries in the series gives the player a top-down view and consists of two styles of play. Single-player campaigns, where you must defeat enemies and reach an exit to progress through levels, and multiplayer modes, where players must try and kill one another instead. Gameplay involves strategically placing down bombs, which explode in multiple directions after a certain amount of time, in order to destroy obstacles and kill enemies and other players. The player can pick up various power-ups, giving them benefits such as larger explosions or the ability to place more bombs down at a time. The player is killed if they touch an enemy or get caught up in a bomb's explosion. Pocket Bomberman is a platform video game developed by Hudson Soft and originally released for the Game Boy in 1997. It was re-released as a launch title for the Game Boy Color.
What color is yours?
In 1998. This game follows the formula of other Bomberman titles in most ways, but you will not be playing from a top-down view, but rather from a traditional side-scrolling view. Pocket Bomberman features a total of 5 worlds, spanning 25 levels. Each world follows a different theme, including forest, underwater, cloud, and a dark underworld. At the end of each world is a boss fight. There is one minigame in this title called Jump Mode, where players must guide Bomberman through an easy, medium, or hard course. Bomberman will constantly jump and the player can only place bombs in this mode. This title has a really cool intro that brings some plot elements into the mix. The story isn't really mentioned again in the game until you get to the ending cutscene, but to be honest, I thought it was epic and awesome the way they introduced this game at the title screen. Now let's get on to the review of the game. Graphics. 5 out of 10. Everything looks pretty unremarkable for the most part. The backgrounds, the environment, and most of the sprites. The one thing that does stand out, however, is the bosses are nice and large, and they catch your eye as you're battling them. Sound. 6 out of 10. Again, nothing too amazing here. I do enjoy the track that's played when you enter a new stage, and I also enjoy the boss fight music. The sound effects and most of the other tracks present were just there, fairly generic. Control. 7 out of 10. Bomberman controls really well. I was usually able to maneuver and place bombs exactly how, where, and when I wanted to. The only issue I really had with the control was when I wanted to ascend with a jump through a narrow space. Doing so requires Bomberman to be quite centered, and it was frustrating to hit my head on empty air and then die to a threat, rather than jump up to the level I wanted to. Unfortunately, this seemed to happen too often, and I had to deduct quite a bit from the control score because of it. Gameplay. 8 out of 10. When it comes to gameplay, I want to start out talking about one thing in particular. One aspect of this game really stood out, and that is the boss fights. The boss fights were absolutely superb. They were very fun and memorable. I died a lot to the bosses, but I did not feel the deaths were cheap, aside from dying to the stage 3 bosses homing snakes over and over and over again, which was awful. This title allows you to blow up certain blocks to look for power-ups, and the power-ups are quite nice, some of which allow you to fly, place multiple bombs at once, and extend the range of your bomb explosions. One thing to note about this game is the difficulty spike at level 3. Level 1 and 2 were much easier to get through. It didn't matter too much though, as you do get infinite continues in this game, and there's a password system that lets you return to wherever you leave off. Story. 7 out of 10. As I mentioned before, this game starts out with a cool epic intro at the title screen. Long, long ago, the sun was covered by a dark and heavy cloud. It was said that the cause was a monster who had sealed the Sword of the Sun. It was also said that in order to unseal the Sword of the Sun, a hero must collect 5 Power Stones, which were guarded by 5 monsters in the Evil Mountain. Bomberman was forced to take up the challenge of collecting all the Power Stones, as he was the last hero capable of defeating such strong monsters. Aside from the ending scene, there isn't really any story progression to be had in this game, which did hurt the story score a bit. I gave it a 7 out of 10 though, despite the limited amount of plot, because most games that were not RPGs on this console were not trying to do story, and since this game did, and it left a really nice impact, I decided to give it a score. Replayability. 5 out of 10. Playing through this game's main mode again doesn't really sound too enticing, but this iteration does provide an extra mode for players thirsty for more Bomberman. Jump Game is a bonus mode in this title. The Jump Game is a minigame in which Bomberman repeatedly jumps up and down and you cannot stop him. The levels start out at a ground level and you must ascend vertically. Bomberman must use bombs to destroy the boss character in order to move on to the next part of the tower. In each difficulty setting, the boss will be faced 3 times before the stage ends. Something that I wasn't aware of when I played through this game is that the bosses in the Jump Game minigame are boss characters from the Virtual Boy version of Panic Bomber. Each boss appears in a different difficulty level. The bosses appear as giant heads that move from side to side, and each one takes 2 bomb blasts to defeat. To be honest, this mode is pretty fun, but beating all 3 difficulties can be done very quickly, and once you do that, why play this again? Overall score, 6.3 out of 10.